It was just after midnight in Iran. The skies were quiet. The radar operators at Iran's integrated air defense network scanned their screens. Nothing unusual. No threats, no alerts. What they didn't know was that 6 American fighter pilots were already inside their airspace, non-stealth jets, visible to radar, flying nearly 300 miles deep into one of the most heavily defended skies on Earth. And they had a very specific job to do: protect a fleet of ghost bombers, bombers that no one could see it, so those bombers could destroy Iran's nuclear dream. This is the story of Operation Midnight Hammer. And more specifically, this is the story of the 6 pilots that almost nobody talked about until now. To understand what these 6 fighter pilots did, you first need to understand what was happening in the Middle East in the spring and summer of 2025. Israel and Iran had been engaged in what analysts described as a 12-day war, an intense exchange of strikes, counterstrikes, drone attacks, and missile barrages. Iran had been developing nuclear capabilities for years, and behind the scenes, the United States had been watching very closely. Then came the order from Washington. The U.S. would strike Iran's nuclear infrastructure, not with a few cruise missiles fired from a safe distance, but with the most powerful bunker-busting bombs ever developed, dropped by the most secretive bombers in the American arsenal. The weapon? The GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, a 30,000-pound bunker buster bomb specifically designed to punch through hardened underground facilities. These were enormous weapons, so large that only one aircraft in the U.S. inventory can carry them: the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. The targets were Iran's most fortified nuclear facilities: Fordow, buried deep into a mountain outside the city of Qom; Natanz, another enrichment facility further to the north; and Isfahan, home to key surface infrastructure supporting the nuclear program. These weren't easy targets. They were hardened, buried, defended. Iran had spent years building them to survive exactly this kind of attack. So the United States prepared a mission of unprecedented scale and complexity, a mission they had reportedly been planning and rehearsing for years. They called it Operation Midnight Hammer. The plan was breathtaking in its ambition and in its deception. 7 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers departed Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. These aircraft are among the most expensive and capable military platforms ever built, each one worth over $2 billion. They can fly halfway around the world without landing, refueling in midair multiple times along the way. They are essentially invisible to radar. But here's where the deception began. To confuse Iran and anyone watching, the mission planners split the B-2s. 2 bombers flew west, out over the Pacific, as a decoy, a feint designed to fool open-source intelligence monitors and any foreign spies tracking American aircraft movements. It worked. The real strike package, 7 B-2s, flew east quietly with minimal radio communications across the Atlantic, then south toward the Persian Gulf. Each B-2 crew endured what would become an 18-hour one-way trip just to get into the target area. The pilots completed 6 to 7 mid-air refuelings, each taking roughly 30 minutes, just to keep the bombers fueled across thousands of miles. To maintain the element of surprise, the Joint Chiefs of Staff noted that the B-2s proceeded with minimal communications throughout. No one was broadcasting on open frequencies. No one was pinging radar unnecessarily. They were ghosts. Once over land, the B-2S linked up with escort and support aircraft, described by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs as a complex, tightly timed maneuver requiring exact synchronization across multiple platforms in a narrow piece of airspace. And those escort aircraft? That's where our 6 F-16 pilots come in. In total, more than 125 U.S. aircraft participated in Operation Midnight Hammer. That included F-22 Raptors, F-35 Lightning IIs, F-15E Strike Eagles, EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft, dozens of aerial refueling tankers, a U.S. Navy Ohio-class guided missile submarine, and intelligence surveillance and reconnaissance platforms. This was the full weight of American military power, brought to bear in a single night. But the 6 men and women of the 55th Fighter Squadron, flying their F-16 Fighting Falcons, faced a set of challenges that night that nobody else did. Let's talk about what made these pilots' missions so different and so extraordinarily dangerous. The B-2 Spirit is a stealth aircraft. Its shape, its materials, its design, everything about it is engineered to absorb or deflect radar waves. To an Iranian radar operator, a B-2 overhead might show up as a signal no bigger than a small bird. It is, for all practical purposes, invisible. The F-16 Fighting Falcon is not stealth. Not even slightly. As retired F-16 pilot John Waters put it, on radar, an F-16 will stand out like a sore thumb. Think about what that means for a mission like this. The B-2s are ghosts, slipping through the Iranian air defense network undetected. But the F-16s? The moment they crossed into Iranian airspace, every radar station in range could potentially see them. And Iran's air defense network is not something to take lightly. Iran operates a sophisticated, layered, integrated air and missile defense system, sometimes abbreviated IADS, including Russian-made S-300 surface-to-air missile batteries, domestically produced systems like the Bavar 373, and a network of radar sites feeding data to command centers. This system was designed with exactly this scenario in mind, intercepting hostile aircraft over Iranian territory. The award citations released by the Air Force described these 6 pilots as flying, and I'm paraphrasing the language here, at grave risk to their lives, as the only aircraft without low observable design, deep into a sophisticated Iranian integrated air and missile defense network. Going that deep into defended airspace in non-stealth jets meant these pilots went far beyond the reach of friendly personnel recovery assets, meaning if they were shot down, nobody was coming to get them. They accepted, in the words of their own award documents, the considerable risk of capture if anything went wrong. And yet they went anyway. Why? Because the B-2s needed them. During the most vulnerable moments, the approach to target, the weapons release, the period when the bombers were locked on their run, they needed something clearing the path. And that job fell to the F-16S. While the F-16S were doing their deadly work, the B-2S reached their targets. At approximately 6:40 p.m. Eastern Time on the night of June 21st, 2025, which was about 2:10 a.m. local time in Iran, the lead B-2 dropped the first 2 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators on Fordow. These 30,000-pound bombs are not like anything in a typical military arsenal. They were specifically engineered to penetrate deep into the earth and destroy hardened underground bunkers. Fordow is buried inside a mountain. Over the next 25 minutes, the remaining bombers struck their targets. All told, 14 massive ordnance penetrators were dropped on Fordow and Natanz. Meanwhile, the submarine, believed to be an Ohio-class guided missile submarine, had already launched more than 24 Tomahawk cruise missiles at Isfahan, carefully timed so as not to alert the Fordow defenders before the bombers arrived. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs confirmed, Iran's fighters did not scramble. Iran's surface-to-air missile systems did not engage. They never saw the B-2s coming. Satellite imagery released afterward showed massive craters punched into the ridgeline above Fordow. Tunnel entrances were blocked with rubble. At Natanz, a crater roughly 5.5 meters in diameter was visible above the underground complex. Isfahan showed extensive building damage across the facility. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth declared the operation had obliterated Iran's nuclear ambitions. The mission from departure to return was approximately 36 hours for the B-2 crews. When the bombers finally landed back at Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, people gathered along the flight line to watch them come home. For nearly a year, the role of the F-16 pilots remained in the shadow of the larger story. The B-2S got the headlines. The bunker busters got the analysis. The strategic implications got the debate. Then, on May 5, 2026, almost 11 months after the mission, General Adrian Spain, commander of Air Combat Command, stood before a formation at Shaw Air Force Base in South Carolina and presented 6 F-16 pilots with the Distinguished Flying Cross, one of the nation's highest military decorations, awarded for extraordinary heroism or achievement in flight. The 6 recipients were Lieutenant Colonel Christopher M. Beckett, the 55th Fighter Squadron commander, Major Matthew J. Croghan, Major Alexander J. Tremblay, Captain Abigail D. Mayo, Captain Megan C. Langus, and Captain Daniel J. Dodson. Several of the medals carried additional V devices for valor, or C devices indicating combat. General Spain's remarks said it plainly. Operation Midnight Hammer, the strike that helped end the 12-day war, doesn't happen without these 6 airmen. He continued, that mission reminded every adversary watching that American air power can be delivered anywhere, anytime, and for better or worse, make it look easy. But we know it's not easy. It's not easy. Hundreds of miles into defended airspace, in jets without stealth, with refueling going wrong, fuel running critically low, and Iran's entire air defense network potentially looking right at you. No, it's not easy. But they did it anyway. And because they did it, the B-2s flew uncontested. The bombs hit their targets, and the mission succeeded. The 55th Fighter Squadron adds this chapter to a lineage that stretches back to 1917. A squadron that flew P-38 Lightnings and P-51 Mustangs over Normandy, that provided air cover during the Battle of the Bulge, and that now adds its name to the first operational use of the most powerful conventional bomb in American military history. We live in an age where stealth technology and precision weapons can make war look clean, almost surgical, when broadcast from a Pentagon podium. But behind every perfectly placed munition, behind every successful mission, there are human beings making real-time decisions under conditions most of us will never understand. 6 pilots volunteered to fly non-stealth jets into one of the most dangerous patches of sky on Earth. They flew at speeds nobody had ever tried during aerial refueling. They knocked out Iranian radar and missile systems with precision weapons. They shielded invisible bombers from visible threats. And they flew home on fumes, with their commander quietly uncertain whether everyone would make it back. An expert quoted in coverage of the story put it best. It's rare that we get a chance to take a peek into the kinds of decisions that these aviators have to make, and the ramifications of getting it wrong. Operation Midnight Hammer was a massive historic mission involving 125 aircraft, submarines, satellites, and months of planning. But when it came down to the most dangerous moment, when the bombers were over target and most vulnerable, 6 pilots from Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina, were out in front, in planes that radar could see, doing the job that nobody else could do. The mission these 6 pilots flew has a name that goes back to the Vietnam War. It's called the Wild Weasel mission, and it is one of the most dangerous jobs in military aviation. The concept is simple on paper, terrifying in practice. You fly a jet that enemy radar can detect. You fly it directly toward enemy surface-to-air missile sites. You want them to turn on their radar and try to lock onto you, and then, before they can fire or while their radar is active, you destroy them with anti-radiation missiles. The weapon of choice is the AGM-88 high-speed anti-radiation missile, known as HARM. These missiles home in on the radar emissions of enemy air defense systems. Turn your radar on, and the HARM will find you. The 55th Fighter Squadron at Shaw Air Force Base, South Carolina, is one of the few squadrons specifically trained and equipped for this Wild Weasel mission. Their commander, Lieutenant Colonel Christopher Beckett, said it himself. When I talk Shaw, we are the only ones that are available to go anywhere at any time and execute the Wild Weasel mission. And that night over Iran, they executed it. According to the award citations, the F-16S employed multiple AGM-88 suppressive weapons against enemy threats, protecting the bombers and their airmen during their most vulnerable time over target. They were destroying Iranian radar and missile systems, clearing a corridor through which the invisible B-2s could fly safely. Every SAM site they silenced was a threat the bombers didn't have to face. Every radar they killed was an eye that went dark. The F-35s and F-22s played layered roles too, mapping threats, suppressing with missiles, providing networked targeting data, and ensuring the B-2's safe entry and exit. The EA-18G Growlers jammed Iranian radar and communications, but the F-16S were doing the direct, close-in, radar-on-radar suppression work, the work that required them to be visible, to be detectable, and to be in range. Remember, the F-22s and F-35s are stealth, The F-16 are not. They stood in the open so the others could hide. But here's the part of the story that really reveals how close to the edge this mission ran. The part that Business Insider and other outlets reported from the actual award citations. Before the F-16S even reached Iranian airspace, things started going wrong. There were refueling disruptions. The mission required multiple mid-air refuelings from KC-135 Stratotanker aircraft, the flying gas stations that keep U.S. air power aloft across the globe. But those refuelings didn't all go as planned. There were timeline delays. In response to those delays, 2 of the 6 F-16 pilots, according to their award citations, executed air refueling at speeds above anything previously performed in the F-16. Read that again. Above anything previously performed in the F-16. They were pushing the envelope of what the aircraft and the refueling system were designed to do in real time over hostile territory because the mission schedule demanded it. That kind of in-flight replanning, while managing navigation, threat assessment, communications, and the sheer mental load of combat, is extraordinary. But the fuel problems didn't end there. After completing their mission, after flying deep into Iran, suppressing air defenses, protecting the bombers through their most vulnerable moments, the 6 F-16 pilots turned for home, and they were flying on fumes. The award citations describe the pilots contending with critically low fuel on the way out. Think about what that means. You're in a single-engine fighter jet. You've just been flying over one of the world's most dangerous air defense networks. You've fired weapons. You've done in-flight refueling at unprecedented speeds. And now you're heading for the exit, in the dark, with a fuel gauge telling you that you may not have enough to make it home. Their squadron commander, Lieutenant Colonel Beckett, said this in a public statement after the awards ceremony. When I look at it as a commander, bringing home everybody was questionable during some of these missions. Questionable. Let that land. This wasn't a routine deployment. This wasn't a training exercise. Whether all 6 pilots would make it home was, in the commander's own words, questionable. They all made it home,